The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Windsor Castle as Princess Charlotte carefully adjusted her navy blue dress. At 9 years old, she had already learned the importance of looking perfect for royal events. Today was different, though. Today was the annual Commonwealth Day service, and she could sense the tension in the air. Charlotte had noticed things changing in the palace over the past few months. Whispered conversations would stop when she entered rooms. Her grandmother, Queen Camilla, seemed more distant lately, especially when Charlotte's mother, Catherine, was around. The young princess didn't understand all the grown-up politics, but she was observant enough to know something was wrong. As Charlotte made her way down the grand corridor, she could hear voices coming from the blue drawing room. She recognized her mother's voice, calm but firm, speaking to someone. Curiosity got the better of her, and she quietly approached the partially open door. "The seating arrangement is simply not appropriate," Catherine was saying. "Charlotte should be seated with the immediate family, not relegated to the second row." Camilla's voice responded, sharp and authoritative. "The arrangements have been made according to protocol. Charlotte will sit where she has been assigned." Charlotte pressed herself against the wall, her heart racing. She had heard enough palace conversations to understand that when the adults talked about protocol, it usually meant someone was trying to put someone else in their place, and right now it seemed like Queen Camilla was trying to put her in hers. "She's a future member of the working royal family," Catherine continued, her voice remaining steady despite the obvious tension. "Her position should reflect that." "She's a child," Camilla replied dismissively, "and children should learn their place early. The monarchy isn't about feelings, Catherine. It's about hierarchy and respect for those who have earned their positions." Charlotte felt a strange mix of emotions wash over her. Hurt, because it seemed like Queen Camilla didn't think she was important. Angry, because she could hear the dismissive tone in her grandmother's voice when talking about her mother. But mostly, she felt determined. Her great-grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, had always told her that being royal meant standing up for what was right, even when it was difficult. The young princess straightened her shoulders and quietly moved away from the door. She had heard enough. If Queen Camilla wanted to play games with protocol, Charlotte would show her that even a 9-year-old could understand the rules of royal behavior. Later that morning, as the royal family gathered in the castle's entrance hall before departing for Westminster Abbey, Charlotte observed everything with new eyes. She watched how Queen Camilla commanded attention, how the staff hurried to fulfill her requests, and how even her own parents seemed to defer to her authority. But Charlotte also noticed something else. She saw how the younger staff members looked at Queen Camilla with barely concealed resentment. She observed the tight smiles on her aunts' faces when Camilla spoke. Most importantly, she noticed how her grandfather, King Charles, seemed tired and worn down by the constant tension. As they prepared to leave for the service, Charlotte made a decision that would change everything. She had been taught from birth about the importance of protocol, about respecting the hierarchy of the royal family. But she had also been taught about justice, kindness, and standing up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. The convoy of cars pulled up to the castle entrance, and Charlotte watched as Queen Camilla swept toward the first car, expecting everyone to follow her lead as they always did. The staff bowed their heads respectfully, the younger royals stepped aside to let her pass, and even Charlotte's parents seemed resigned to following the established order. But as Queen Camilla reached for the car door handle, something unexpected happened. Charlotte stepped forward, not to follow but to block her path. The young princess didn't say a word, but her presence was unmistakable. She stood there, small but determined, her blue eyes meeting Queen Camilla's surprised gaze. The entrance hall fell silent. Staff members froze in place, unsure of what they were witnessing. Catherine gasped softly, while Prince William's eyes widened in surprise. King Charles looked up from his papers, confused by the sudden stillness. Queen Camilla stared down at the young girl blocking her way, completely unprepared for this moment of quiet rebellion. She had faced political opponents, dealt with media criticism, and navigated decades of royal protocols. But she had never been challenged by a 9-year-old princess who seemed to understand exactly what she was doing. "Charlotte," Camilla said carefully, her voice controlled but with an edge of warning. "Move aside, dear. We need to leave." But Charlotte didn't move. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, the way her great-grandmother used to do when she was making a point. "After you, Your Majesty," Charlotte said politely, but she gestured not toward the car, but toward the second vehicle in the convoy. The gesture was small, almost imperceptible to anyone who didn't understand royal protocol. But everyone in that entrance hall understood exactly what Princess Charlotte was doing. She was quietly, respectfully, but firmly indicating that Queen Camilla should take the second car, while the immediate family, including herself, would travel in the first. It was a breach of established protocol, but it was also a statement about the future of the monarchy. Charlotte wasn't just standing up for herself. She was establishing her place in the royal hierarchy and defending her family's position. She was showing everyone present that she understood her role and wouldn't be diminished by anyone, regardless of their current title. Queen Camilla's face flushed red as the implications of Charlotte's gesture sank in. The young princess had just publicly challenged her authority in front of the entire household staff and royal family members. Worse, she had done it with such perfect royal composure that it would be difficult to criticize without looking petty. The silence stretched on, heavy with tension and possibility. Everyone waited to see how Queen Camilla would respond to this unexpected challenge from the youngest member of the family. Charlotte stood her ground, her expression calm and respectful, but unmistakably determined. This was the moment that would define not just the rest of their day, but potentially the future dynamics of the entire royal family. A 9-year-old princess had just drawn a line in the sand, and now everyone would have to choose which side they were on. The tension in Windsor Castle's entrance hall was so thick, it seemed like everyone had forgotten how to breathe. Queen Camilla stared down at Princess Charlotte, who maintained her position with the kind of quiet dignity that reminded everyone present of the late Queen Elizabeth II. The young princess had inherited more than just her great-grandmother's blue eyes. She had inherited her steel spine as well. King Charles stepped forward, clearly sensing the explosive potential of the moment. His face showed a mixture of pride and concern as he looked at his granddaughter standing her ground against his wife. He had spent years trying to balance his love for Camilla with his duty to his family, and now his 9-year-old granddaughter was forcing a moment of truth that he had been avoiding. "Perhaps we should all take a breath," Charles began diplomatically, but Charlotte turned to look at him with such a mature expression that he fell silent. In that moment, he saw his late mother in his granddaughter's face, and he remembered all the times the Queen had used silence and presence to make her point more effectively than words ever could. Queen Camilla's hands clenched at her sides. She had worked for decades to establish her position in the royal family, fighting against public opinion, media criticism, and internal resistance. She had finally reached the pinnacle of royal hierarchy, only to be challenged by a child who hadn't even reached double digits in age. "Charlotte, dear," Camilla said again, her voice carefully modulated but with an underlying sharpness that everyone could hear. "This is not appropriate behavior. Royal children should respect their elders and follow protocol." But Charlotte had learned from watching her great-grandmother that sometimes the most powerful response was no response at all. She simply stood there, her small frame somehow commanding the attention of every adult in the room. Her silence spoke volumes about her understanding of royal dignity and her refusal to be intimidated. Catherine stepped forward, her maternal instincts warring with her royal training. She wanted to protect her daughter, but she also recognized that Charlotte was fighting a battle that needed to be fought. For months, Catherine had watched Camilla systematically try to diminish Charlotte's position within the family, always couched in terms of protocol and proper behavior. Charlotte is simply showing respect for the proper order of precedence, Catherine said quietly, her words carefully chosen. As a future working royal, she understands her position in the family hierarchy. The statement was diplomatic but pointed. Catherine was essentially saying that Charlotte's action was correct according to royal protocol, which meant Camilla's expectations were wrong. It was a masterful move that used Camilla's own weapon, protocol, against her. Prince William moved to stand beside his wife and daughter, creating a united front that spoke louder than words. His presence beside Charlotte sent a clear message to everyone in the room about where his loyalties lay and how he viewed his daughter's actions. The future king was supporting his daughter's quiet rebellion. Queen Camilla looked around the entrance hall and realized that the dynamics had shifted dramatically in just a few minutes. The staff members, who usually hurried to fulfill her every request, were now watching the scene with barely concealed interest. Some were even trying to hide smiles as they witnessed the young princess's bold stand. Lady-in-waiting Sarah Chen, who had served the royal family for over 20 years, later told her colleagues that she had never seen anything quite like it. The little princess didn't raise her voice, didn't make a scene, didn't even move from her spot, Sarah would recount. But somehow she commanded that entire room just by standing there with such quiet dignity. It was like watching a masterclass in royal behavior. The standoff continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only a minute or two. Charlotte remained perfectly still, her eyes never leaving Queen Camilla's face. She wasn't being disrespectful or rude, she was simply refusing to be pushed aside. Her great-grandmother had taught her that sometimes a royal had to take a stand, even when it was uncomfortable or difficult. Finally, King Charles made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. "You know what?" he said, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. "Charlotte is absolutely right. The immediate family should travel together." He gestured toward the first car. Catherine, William, George, Charlotte, and Louis in the first vehicle. Camilla and I will follow in the second car. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. King Charles had just publicly sided with his granddaughter against his wife, validating Charlotte's understanding of protocol and her right to challenge what she saw as unfair treatment. It was a moment that would be remembered and discussed in royal circles for years to come. Queen Camilla's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, anger, hurt, and finally, a carefully controlled mask of royal composure. She had been outmaneuvered by a 9-year-old and publicly corrected by her husband. The humiliation was complete, but she was too experienced to let it show more than necessary. "Of course," Camilla said with forced brightness. "How thoughtful of Charlotte to remind us of the proper arrangements." Her words were gracious, but everyone could hear the underlying tension. She had been defeated, but she was accepting her defeat with as much dignity as she could muster. Charlotte finally moved, but not in the way anyone expected. Instead of walking toward the first car in triumph, she approached Queen Camilla with the same calm composure she had maintained throughout the entire confrontation. When she reached the Queen, she performed a perfect curtsy, the kind her great-grandmother had taught her years ago. "Thank you for understanding, grandmother," Charlotte said formally but kindly. The gesture was brilliant in its simplicity. It showed respect for Camilla's position while also establishing Charlotte's own authority. She was being gracious in victory, which was perhaps the most royal behavior of all. The title grandmother wasn't lost on anyone present. Charlotte could have said, "Your Majesty," or "Queen Camilla." But by choosing the familial term, she was extending an olive branch, while also reminding everyone of the family relationships that transcended royal hierarchy. Queen Camilla looked down at the young girl, who had just given her a lesson in royal protocol and political maneuvering. Despite her anger and embarrassment, she couldn't help but feel a grudging respect for Charlotte's skill. The child had outplayed her completely, and had done it with such perfect royal behavior that no one could criticize her actions. As the royal family finally made their way to their respective cars, the staff members who had witnessed the encounter exchanged meaningful glances. They had just seen the future of the monarchy in action, and it looked very different from what they had expected. Princess Charlotte had shown that she would not be underestimated or pushed aside, not even by the Queen herself. The cars pulled away from Windsor Castle, but the reverberations of what had happened in the entrance hall would continue for much longer. Charlotte had drawn a line that could not be uncrossed, established a precedent that could not be ignored, and shown a strength of character that could not be dismissed. As they drove toward Westminster Abbey, Charlotte sat quietly in the first car, surrounded by her immediate family. She had won this battle, but she was smart enough to know that the war was far from over. Queen Camilla would not forget this humiliation, and she would undoubtedly look for ways to reassert her authority. But Charlotte was ready for whatever came next. She had learned an important lesson about standing up for herself and her family, and she had discovered that she had the strength and intelligence to hold her own against even the most powerful members of the royal family. The shy little princess was growing into a formidable future royal, one who would not be easily intimidated or marginalized. The game had changed, and everyone knew it. The Westminster Abbey service proceeded without any outward signs of the drama that had unfolded earlier at Windsor Castle. To the thousands of people watching around the world, the royal family appeared to be the picture of unity and tradition. But for those who knew what to look for, the subtle changes in positioning and body language told a different story entirely. Princess Charlotte sat in the front row with her immediate family, exactly where she had insisted she belonged. Her posture was perfect, her attention focused on the ceremony, but those closest to her could see the quiet satisfaction in her eyes. She had fought for her rightful place and won, but more importantly, she had established herself as a force to be reckoned with in the royal family dynamics. Queen Camilla, seated one row behind with King Charles and other senior royals, maintained her composure throughout the service. Her years of experience in public life served her well, as she projected an image of serene dignity despite the humiliation she had experienced earlier. But royal watchers who knew her well could detect the slight tightness around her eyes and the way her hands gripped her program just a little too firmly. During the processional, something remarkable happened that would become the subject of intense speculation among royal correspondents for weeks to come. As the family filed out of the Abbey, Princess Charlotte paused beside Queen Camilla's row and waited. It was a small gesture, barely noticeable to the television cameras, but it spoke volumes about the young princess's growing understanding of royal diplomacy. "Shall we walk together, grandmother?" Charlotte asked quietly, extending her small hand toward Queen Camilla. The offer was unexpected and brilliant in its implications. Charlotte was giving Camilla an opportunity to save face by appearing to be in harmony with the granddaughter who had just outmaneuvered her so thoroughly. Queen Camilla stared at the offered hand for a moment, recognizing the olive branch for what it was. Charlotte was showing that she could be magnanimous in victory, a quality that would serve her well in her future royal role. With years of political experience behind her, Camilla understood that accepting this gesture would be wise, even if it meant swallowing her pride. "That would be lovely, dear," Camilla replied, taking Charlotte's hand and rising from her seat. To the watching world, it appeared to be a sweet moment between grandmother and granddaughter. Only those who had witnessed the morning's events understood the deeper significance of this public reconciliation. As they walked together down the Abbey's ancient aisle, Charlotte maintained her composure with remarkable maturity. She had learned that winning wasn't just about getting your way, it was about knowing how to manage the aftermath of victory. By publicly showing respect and affection for Queen Camilla, she was demonstrating the kind of political wisdom that would make her a formidable royal in the years to come. The car ride back to Windsor Castle was notably different from the morning's journey. This time, Charlotte rode with King Charles and Queen Camilla, while her parents traveled separately. It had been Charlotte's suggestion, another masterstroke of royal diplomacy that impressed even the most experienced courtiers. "You handled yourself very well today," King Charles said to his granddaughter as they traveled through London's streets. There was pride in his voice, but also a note of concern. He recognized that Charlotte had inherited the royal family's talent for political maneuvering, but he worried about what that might mean for a 9-year-old child. Charlotte looked up at her grandfather with those perceptive blue eyes. "Great-Granny always said that being royal means knowing when to stand firm and when to be kind," she replied simply. "Today I needed to do both." Queen Camilla listened to this exchange with growing amazement. She was beginning to understand that she had not just been outplayed by a child, but by someone who possessed an instinctive understanding of royal duty and political strategy that some adults never mastered. It was both impressive and slightly intimidating. "Your great-grandmother would be very proud," Camilla said finally. And for the first time that day, her words carried genuine warmth rather than forced politeness. She always believed that the monarchy's strength came from family unity, even when family members disagreed. Charlotte smiled at this, recognizing the peace offering in Queen Camilla's words. "She also said that everyone in the family has an important role to play," Charlotte replied diplomatically. "Including you, grandmother." The remainder of the ride passed in comfortable conversation, with Charlotte demonstrating that she could be as charming and engaging as she was determined. She asked Queen Camilla about her charitable work, listened attentively to stories about her royal duties, and showed genuine interest in learning about the responsibilities that came with her position. By the time they reached Windsor Castle, something fundamental had shifted in the relationship between Princess Charlotte and Queen Camilla. What had begun as a power struggle had evolved into something more complex, a mutual respect between two strong-willed women who recognized each other's capabilities. That evening, as the family gathered for a private dinner, the events of the day continued to reverberate through their conversations. Charlotte's parents were both proud and concerned about their daughter's bold actions, while her grandfather seemed almost relieved that the underlying tensions had finally come to a head. "I think we all learned something important today," Prince William said as they sat around the dining table. "Charlotte reminded us that respect has to go both ways, regardless of age or position." Catherine nodded in agreement. "She also showed us that standing up for what's right doesn't have to mean being disrespectful or unkind. The way she handled the aftermath was just as important as her initial stand." Queen Camilla, who had been quiet through most of the dinner conversation, finally spoke up. "I owe everyone an apology," she said, her voice steady but emotional. "I've been so focused on establishing my own position that I lost sight of what's best for the family as a whole. Charlotte was right to challenge me, and she did it with more grace than I showed in response." The admission was met with surprised silence around the table. Queen Camilla was not known for public apologies or admissions of fault, but Charlotte's actions had clearly prompted some serious self-reflection. Charlotte, who had been listening to the adult conversation with the same focused attention she had shown during the Abbey service, finally spoke up. "We're all still learning how to be a family together," she said simply. "Great-Granny used to say that the best families are the ones where everyone can be honest with each other." Her words carried a wisdom that seemed well beyond her years, but they also carried the innocence of a child who believed that problems could be solved with honesty and goodwill. It was this combination of insight and optimism that made her intervention so powerful and effective. King Charles looked around the table at his family, his wife, his son and daughter-in-law, and his remarkable granddaughter, and felt a sense of hope that he hadn't experienced in months. The tensions that had been building within the family had been addressed directly and honestly, largely thanks to Charlotte's courage in forcing the issue. "I think we're going to be just fine," he said, raising his glass in a toast, to Princess Charlotte, who reminded us all what it means to be royal. As the family raised their glasses, Charlotte felt the weight of what she had accomplished beginning to sink in. She had not just won a battle over seating arrangements or protocol. She had helped her family find a way to be honest with each other about their problems and work towards solutions. The young princess also understood that this was just the beginning. The royal family would face many more challenges in the years to come, and she would need to continue developing the skills she had displayed today, the ability to stand firm when necessary, the wisdom to know when to extend grace, and the political intelligence to navigate complex family dynamics. But for now, surrounded by her family and knowing that she had earned their respect and admiration, Princess Charlotte felt ready for whatever the future might bring. She had proven that she could hold her own with the most powerful people in her world, and she had done it without losing her essential kindness and compassion. The protocol had indeed been shattered that day, but in its place, something stronger and more authentic had emerged. The royal family had learned to see each other not just as titles and positions, but as real people with legitimate needs and feelings. And at the center of this transformation was a 9-year-old princess who had the courage to demand better and the wisdom to help everyone find their way there together. As Charlotte prepared for bed that night, she thought about her great-grandmother's words about duty, family, and the importance of standing up for what was right. She had honored that legacy today, but she had also begun to create her own. The future of the monarchy looked a little different now, and Princess Charlotte was ready to help shape it with the same quiet strength and determined grace she had shown at Windsor Castle that morning.